Mr. Speaker, sir, I first of all send my condolences to the families that lost loved ones. I also look at those who have lost livelihoods, those who have been maimed. And I'll hear this voice, the blood of the innocent, that is crying out for justice on our streets. When in 2011, a group of Kenyans, including myself, peacefully occupied Jogoo House and evicted Professor Ongeri, demanding that he accounts for 4.6 billion shillings that had been given to free primary education, the worst that was done to us is that non-state actors were hired to come and splash human feces that has been made into a sludge. We were covered in human feces. When we did not budge, they sent a contingent of the JSU. After about 3 days, they arrested us. And we were taken to industrial area, and we are alive today. After the president, by the way, and the courts acquitted us, I should say that. After the president addressed the nation on the 25th of June, claiming criminals had invaded parliament and staff, I took it upon myself to do a hospital crawl. I crawled across hospitals in Nairobi at midnight to try and identify who these criminals were that the president was referring to. At the matter, there were 2 people admitted with rubber bullet wounds, shot at point blank range. At Mbagathi, they had treated more than 40 people for gunshot wounds and discharged them. At the Nairobi hospital, there were 2 people who were admitted. At Kenyatta, I saw 3 bodies, dead people, dead kids, in fact, they were young people. 15 were in ICU with the gunshots to the head. 148 were in the wards with injuries to multiple parts of the body, including a young boy who was about 14, 15, gunshot through the shoulder. I looked at these people. None of them was a criminal. And yet the president had gone on national TV and claimed that criminals had come out, and that's why there was justification for the use of that force, and he said that at all costs, force would be used. So, I see the blood of these children, the mayhem, and the amount of violence that was used here, not justified at all. People cannot be killed under the Constitution of Kenya 2010 for exercising their rights. The right to life is a right that is protected in our Constitution. It begins at conception, ends at natural death. One thing, during the operations, I've been to very many street demonstrations. The first thing that I noticed was out of character was the command structure of the police. I was able to identify some policemen walking alone, not accompanied. And I began wondering, is there a command structure? That was in the morning. So the question was, how was the police operation planned and conducted? Was there a central command? Who were the field commanders? Who were the sector commanders responsible for each section of the streets? And how have they accounted for the deaths and injuries that happened in areas under their command? How did armed men, for the many times I went on the street to demonstrate, there could be there could be policemen in civilian clothes, but they were never armed. They could participate in an arrest, but I have never seen a person dressed in civilian clothes shooting at the public. I've never seen it. Was this a militia? And to whom does it answer? How did these armed men get to join uniformed police? Do the police standing orders, do the force orders allow for that? How many police officers were issued with live bullets? And have the bullets been accounted for? Why was there so much random shooting? How can you have so many people in hospital with gun wounds for a small demo that took place here? What was the president trying to justify? And can he get away scot-free from claiming there were criminals when he can't produce one criminal who was shot dead on our streets? Why is the internal affairs unit of the police being dismantled since the president came into power? Why has Mr. Koome, to whom the unit answers, transferred almost all competent investigators out of the internal affairs unit? And for those who don't know, the internal affairs unit was set up and is properly equipped to investigate crime by the police. They receive reports from the public, they receive reports from fellow officers. IPOA has got no capacity to investigate policemen. IPOA are civilians. Most of them don't understand the operation orders of the police. There's a special unit that deals with this. Why is it that this unit has been dismantled? Starved of funds, competent officers transferred to outposts, and the unit left as a shell. Some of these officers, Mr. Speaker, sir, were trained at a very high expense by the public outside this country in various jurisdictions, but they are now doing clerical work in outstations since the appointment of IG Koome. Such that right now, as we speak, there is no capacity in the police to investigate what happened on the streets of Nairobi. A capacity that had been built to ensure that if there were any issues, they would be investigated thoroughly by the police who understand how police are supposed to operate. Now, the blood of these children who were killed is crying out for justice. Some were killed in this hallowed house. The young man who was making fun in the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, sir, why did that young man have to be shot dead? We cannot sit here and discuss these niceties that we are discussing here, complaining and not making a case, yet people have buried children whose only crime was that they went out to say that this country can be managed in a better way. If there's anything that this House can resolve to do and still retain its dignity, is to demand for justice for these kids. We have no other business. because this country cannot be run the way it's being run. The mayhem that happened across Tomboya Street on the other side of the city, for some of us who walked there and saw, it's unbelievable. Forget what happened here. It was unbelievable. The number of people who were shot and killed on those sides is unbelievable. Why are we still having abductions? We are seeing stories in the media that some young men have been abducted after the event and have disappeared and bodies have been recovered. Why is life so cheap in this country? So all that we are speaking here, unless we demand justice for the kids who are killed, unless we demand justice for the blood which is crying out to be atoned, there's nothing we are doing here. We are just repeating, we are just going back to the same usual thing of lulling the country to sleep, pretending that something is being done when absolutely nothing is being done. President Ruto claimed on national TV that there were criminals. Can he produce a single criminal who was involved in this business? He has a better intelligence than we do. Can he point out to among those dead people, can he isolate one person who was a criminal that his security forces were justified to kill? This is not how to run a country. You can't brand citizens criminals and kill them and say you are going to do it at all costs. What makes him think that his life is more precious than that of the fellow on the street? If we have to do anything, we must demand accountability for that blood. We must demand that President Ruto produces the criminals he claimed invaded parliament, if they are not citizens. President Ruto must tell us who are these people in civilian and how come that civilians were mingling with armed police, with the uniformed police and shooting people. The time when people said words and they did not, and they got away with it, I think they are behind us. We are talking about the Gen Z. Not all the Gen Z are educated. Not all the Gen Zs are, there were got Gen Zs who came out, who dropped out in class 8, who didn't get an education. And I think about 60% to 70% of the Gen Zs are people who are already dropped through the cracks. And they all came out. People have said that these people are banning schools. I would challenge anybody to tell me where in Kenya was a school banned. No school has ever been banned in Kenya. And I will repeat it, no school has ever been banned in Kenya because what I have seen, because a school is not a dormitory. When these kids were banning dormitories, what statements were they making about this governance of this country? I have never seen a situation whereby kids have burnt books and burnt classrooms. Why is it that all the banning was about dormitories? What statement were they making? Were they crying out for justice? Then you come to say that schools were banning. Not a single school has ever been banned in this country. Or I'm not aware, but what I've seen is that the dormitories have been banned in schools, and I know we have got schools that don't have dormitories, but they are still schools. So why were the kids banning the dormitories? We saw another terrible thing happening the other day on our streets. Doctors sleeping outside in the cold, trying to enforce a CBA. Such an important human resource wasting away when we have in a country where people are dying for lack of medication, for lack of attention. And it cannot be true that there's no money to pay these people. You just need to read the reports of the Auditor General and you'll see that this country is being looted dry. So these people should be employed. We are a Republic of Kenya, and the name Republic is an ideological statement about this country. We have to be governed as a republic. We must be governed as a republic. We are not a kiosk. We have a constitution that says how power should be acquired in this country. And that power, when we have elections, why do people go to Bomas when the constitution says that elections must terminate at the constituency? The next presidential election must end at the constituency for matters to be proper. There's been a call of other things. I hear, I don't know if the cabinet has been dissolved or stuff like that. That is like putting balm on a wound. What we demand, or what I personally think is ready to happen, is that the entire Kenya Kwanza administration, led by Mr. Ruto, must vacate power. The call that Ruto must go is not an idle call. It's a call whose time has come. It's a call whose time has come. Mr. Ruto told us that criminals were on the streets. He has not produced a single criminal. You cannot be told lies every day.
Senator Omtatah.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Just have your seat. I made myself very clear on how we are going to conduct ourselves during debate on this motion. Inasmuch as we suspended points of order, I said let us be responsible in the way we debate and let us be factual. You cannot call the president Mr. Ruto. This is not a Kamkunji. This is the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. Proceed.
Okay, I can call him Dr. Ruto. And,
Senator
President Ruto. I'm finishing. Dr. Ruto, His Excellency the President.
Proceed.
But he never ceased being a minister, so all those titles apply to him, if my English is correct. So I'm demanding that President Ruto vacates office as the only honorable thing to do. He's unable to balance a budget. It has collapsed. Everything around him is collapsing. So you cannot say that his juniors should bear the burden. The ball stops with him, and the call that President Ruto must go is a call that must be applied. And as they say, a fish begins rotting with the head. So, and among my people they say, a river does not flow higher than its source. And when you look at the sun, you must blink. Justice is crying out. Our children have died, something that has never happened in this country. The president has called them criminals. And the president cannot continue sitting in power when the children have died. And he said you do anything at whatever cost. When the Constitution says you can't do anything at whatever cost. So my call is to associate my voice with those who are saying that the president vacates office. There's no room for all these things we are doing here, and we start off with a new slate. Mr. Speaker, sir, anything less than that will not avenge the blood that has been spilled on our streets. A street that is hallowed, a street that is recognized in the Constitution as an arena for engaging politically. As the arena whereby, when this institution fails, the people of Kenya invoke Article 1 and go to engage. When you desecrate such a venue, You don't do anything. There's not even a call that these things should be investigated. Instead, they're trying to say that we go and have dialogue to assuage, to see how to distort what is happening, to do whatever, to see how. I just look at these people like prison guards who are fighting for who becomes the chief warden. Then they learn that there's a prison break. So they all forget about what they were fighting for. They say the first thing we must do is to ensure that this prison is not destroyed. Because their business is the prison. Their business is to keep the people in the prison. So they are now coalescing, forgetting about the fight they were having, who becomes the chief warden. Now they are saying the prison must be kept intact. We're not going to allow that. This country has moved. The government that has to govern this country must govern by law. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I reiterate my words that if really the president values this country, he should do the honorable thing, fall on his sword. President Ruto, fall on your sword and retain, if you have to retain any order. And retain any.
Well, 1 minute, you wind up your thoughts, Senator Omtatah. Just 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. What I was saying is that, like in the old days of the Roman soldiers, when they felt that they had brought dishonor to the country, and they were even, the dishonor was so bad that they could not even let another person kill them, they fell on their swords and died. That's the only way they regained their honor. And the only way Ruto can regain an honor is for him to fall on his sword and let the Kenya Kwanza administration die, so that Kenya can have a new beginning. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you.
At that juncture, we will defer that motion and proceed to the next order. Clerk, kindly call the next order.
Order number 9, motion, approval of sittings of the Senate to be held in Busia County.